As an online journalist, I spend a lot of time on social media, and I'm becoming more and more concerned about the disinformation I see and the effect that that's having on Canadians, the way they view our democratic institutions, and things like stories like the Russian invasion of the Ukraine. So I'm going to talk to Jeffrey Dvorkin, who's a professor of journalism at the University of Toronto, about that. So welcome to the interview, Jeff.
Nice to be with you.
This is a big problem. Give me your general take on the, disinformation issue, especially as it relates to the Russian invasion.
There is quite a lot of disinformation out there, but it's not in the unsubtle form of hitting us over the head with pro-Putin messages. It's more a subtle suggestion of motivation and what is behind the various aspects of the opposition to the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And so it's questioning Zelensky, it's questioning Biden, and indirectly it's questioning Prime Minister Trudeau at the same time. The digital culture has, in its democratic and popular way, undermined people's ability to trust large institutions, whether they be universities or governments or religious organizations or media, especially. And so the ability of bloggers and people who are experts in disinformation, especially in Eastern Europe and in Russia, they're able to plant little seeds of doubt about the motivation of various groups. And this is enough to, really to cause people to pull away from what one would think would be the appropriate way to proceed in these matters. And we saw how effective this was in the 2016 American election, where these bloggers, mostly directed through the Russian government, were able to plant suspicions about Hillary Clinton. And through the ability of the internet to analyze who is receiving certain messages and who would be most receptive to certain messages, they were able to target, about 10% of the voters in many parts of the United States, and allowing them to say, well, I'm not going to vote for Hillary Clinton, I'm going to vote for this guy, Donald Trump.
Now, just the other day, I was on a Facebook thread, and someone was criticizing Prime Minister Trudeau and using the couple of European Union MPs who took after Trudeau for being a tyrant and so on. And it turned out that these MPs are very far right, almost fascist, belong to fascist parties. And this fellow posted one of those. And it's so easy to debunk, though, the source of those. And yet it seems like the people like this fellow are so skeptical, they're so angry that they're not even interested. Anything that crosses their path that is sort of fits their tribal view of the world, they believe it with unquestioningly.
And it's not as if what they have said in that discussion at the European Union is going to suddenly turn people's minds in a different direction. But what it will do is allow the power of suggestion to work over time. There was a political scientist in Michigan a few years ago named Overton, and he developed something called the Overton Window, which was, if you introduce an idea through a small window of opportunity that is really unacceptable to most people, that's fine. But then when you introduce it a second time, a little bit later, people will say, well, I've heard of this before. I wonder if there's anything to it. The Overton window is expanded. So Overton started by denouncing public education in the state of Michigan, which seemed like a ridiculous idea at that time. A few years later, there is a movement to abolish the budget line for public education. That is how effective this idea of the Overton window can be. And it's the same with propaganda from Russia. they will start by suggesting an idea that everyone thinks is ridiculous, but over time, people will say, maybe there's something to it.
What do we do about that, Jeff? And we run across these people all the time, and they're impervious to evidence. They're impervious to a rational argument. So what do we do with, how do we counter this?
I think we have media organizations help the public understand exactly how things work. For example, there's this idea of photographs that are being sent from the Russian side of the fighting in Ukraine. A lot of these photographs are photoshopped, and there's a way that ordinary citizens, even people with not a lot of technical expertise, can determine just the origin of these pictures. We need to make sure that media organizations are exposing them, pointing them out. Journalism, media, educators all have to be part of a concerted and supportive effort in helping people understand the origin of this disinformation, because it's really very damaging, and we need to address it seriously. The federal government is talking about doing this at that level. Frankly, that makes me a little nervous, to have government involved in saying this is true and something else is not. But I think that if there is some kind of collective effort on the part of the various national institutions that make up our civic lives, we might be able to do something about it.
So we might be talking about big media organizations, universities, foundations, civil society groups that could come together, embark on a campaign, be organized about it, provide training to individuals, and then who could then go out and apply those skills and hopefully have some kind of an impact on our public conversation. Is that the approach?
That would be ideal. It's going to take time, and there is a lot of suspicion out there. I mean, people have felt very aggrieved over the last number of years between COVID and the Ottawa occupation and the inability of large institutions to connect with citizens in a more effective way. So we're coming from a grand distance behind in order to rectify this.
Yeah, I mentioned David Coletto earlier, and in the interview I did with him, he's from Abacus Data. In the interview I did with him, he talked about anxious progressives and anxious conservatives. So these are people who are worried about their present financial circumstances, but really worried about the future. And that makes up 48% of the people they surveyed. So and these are the folks who are susceptible to the kind of disinformation that you're talking about. And they're angry. They're really angry as a rule. And you see this on social media all the time. How do we deal with that anger in a kind of rational, rational way?
If I knew the answer to that, I'd be in another line of business. I'm not sure. I think it will take time. It'll take better communication from governments, and it will take more direct effort by organizations to help people understand the nature of our present condition. One of the ways, I've in my own way, I've tried to do this by writing a textbook for journalism students called Trusting the News in a Digital Age. It came out a few months ago and seems to be getting a certain amount of appreciation from various parts of the academic world. I really think that what that can do to help young people understand that easy solutions to complicated problems are usually the wrong solutions.
Well, Jeff, always appreciate your insights. Thank you very much for this.
My pleasure. Thank you.